All right. So welcome today, everyone. We're so glad you could be here. This is the Swetland September seminar, and this is our first hybrid seminar. If you can't tell, we're still kind of figuring out the logistical details, but we're glad you could join us both in person and online. And in a second here, I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful presenter, Tila. We're going to just have a few quick announcements. So I'm Rachel Summer, and I'm the Director of Operations and Partnerships here at the Swetland Center for Environmental Health. I've mentioned this a couple times, but if you are online, go ahead and put your name and the organization you represent in the chat. And once we get started, I'll be monitoring the chat. So if you do have questions or feedback you'd like to share with Tila, I will be monitoring those, and at the end, we'll have some time to go over those. And if you are online, if you don't mind just kind of for now keeping yourself muted just so we can hear Tila clearly, that would be great. And in person as well, if you could mute yourself, that would be great. You could go. And as always, we just like to give you a couple of reminders about the seminars we have coming up. So in October, on the 25th, the COVID-19 YPAR Youth Perspectives on COVID-19 Vaccines in Cleveland, Ohio, will be presented by Dr. Elizabeth Benninger and Megan Schmidt-Sane. And then in November, one of our faculty affiliates, Dr. Brandy Phipps from Central State University, will be speaking on sustainable agriculture systems. And those will both be virtual. So you can register through those through our website and also through the Case Western campus groups. So now I am pleased to share a little bit about our presenter today. So Tila Pattison, who joins me today, is the visionary and leader behind Healing Spaces, which is an environmental justice initiative that began as a Cleveland Documenters Environmental Justice Project. So a little bit about Tila and that initiative. In spring of 2021, with the support of a team of journalists, collaborators, and sponsors, she began a journey to address the issue of urban blight, that is abandoned, derelict land parcels that do riddle low-income communities of color in Cleveland, Ohio. So this quickly evolved into filming a documentary. The Documenters team surveyed, explored healing spaces across the city of Cleveland, the timeline of environmental justice in Cleveland, visual and creative art expressions, and ultimately the genesis of one of the most largest and impactful environmental justice movements to date. So you might not also know about Tila that she leads in her role as a community builder at Neighborhood Leadership Institute, where she coordinates community events. And we are so excited to share, if you haven't heard, that she's also serving on the Nourishing Power Advisory Council here at the Swetland Center and in collaboration with Neighborhood Connections and FAIR. So she will be on the fellowship subgroup supporting our 2022 fellowship cohort through mentorship and other types of support. So with that being said, I'm going to let her take it away. I'll be showing the tour.
No, that's all right. Thank you so much for that introduction, Rachel. And firstly, I want to thank everyone for being here. Thank you for the people that are here. You look amazing. Thank you for the people that are online. You could be anywhere in the world at 9 a.m., but you're here learning about environmental justice and how we can improve our community. So thank you so much. Give yourselves a round of applause. In Healing Spaces Fashions, those that are here see we have a nice setup. We are very much healing spaces, healing of the mind, body, and soul. We come together to bring in those modalities that relax you and ground you and put you in a positive space. So I would like to take a mindful moment. And if we could, your hybrid, if you're virtual, feel free. But those that are here, if you could just stand up for a moment, just so we can stretch, get a good around. Really simple exercise to get the blood moving, get your cells active. You can put your arms up, breathe in, and slowly exhale, releasing your arms downward. Tricking you to doing a little yoga this morning. One more time. Inhale up, look up, exhale down. Okay, I fooled you one more time. We should do it 3. One more time. Inhale up, arms up, high in the sky, look up, give your neck a little stretch, and exhale down. And we'll just intentionally breathe. We should do this throughout the day. It also helps ground us, just helps heal us. Oxygen is vital. It makes water and everything else, keeps us alive thanks to the tree. So if we could just take 3 deep breaths where we expand our abdomen on that inhale. 1, inhale, slowly, deliberately expand your abdomen. Hold it for 2 seconds and slowly release. Excellent. Inhale, slowly expand your abdomen. Hold for 2 seconds, slowly release. And once more, slowly inhale. Let your abdomen expand. Hold for 2 seconds and slowly release. Thank you so much. You can have a seat. And we will set our intention. Also, in the modality, I would like to intend that we exchange ideas in a way that leaves us not only informed, but inspired. So what I like to call what I use educational storytelling. Kind of like we did when we go out into our community events. We like to, sorry.
Might want ahead of you.
Yeah, just a one. Yeah, go back for 1 second. I'll be a little clear when it's time to change. Thank you. We like to present the facts. We like to present the information. We like to educate the public and let them know what they may not know and inform them. But we also like to present that information in a way that is compelling, makes it palatable, that they want to hear it. You don't want to always go out and just drone on about facts, but we tell the stories in a way that's relatable and they know how it applies to them. Informational and fun to listen to. We share videos, and so we'll also do that here, so expect that. At the end, we'll have time for questions and reflections. Because a lot of times what I find is that once people have a term to apply to what their experience is, they're like, oh, is that what that is? Because environmental justice is a term that not many people are familiar with. The next slide, Rachel. So I did want to devote time and a slide to that because that is the $1 million question. What is environmental justice? That was the very first question that was asked when a group of collaborators came together. We were a group of professionals, the Documenters Network. We got together and we said, okay, we are going to form this initiative. We're going to begin this project. Let's do it. Great. What is environmental justice? So it's like really no one really knew how to define that. And so we had to break it down a little further. I learned this in the journey to break it down further. I said, okay, environmental justice. What is environmental justice? Well, there must exist environmental injustice. Break that down, consider the history, come to find in 1981, where we've coined the term, the history of environmental justice. Obviously, it started before that. What we experienced began earlier than 1981, but the church group, Church of God, not an environmental government group, which is always surprising to me. It was a church organization, a faith-based organization that performed these first research, just like you all, but it was a church who did this. They described environmental racism as the racial discrimination in policymaking and the enforcement of regulations and laws, which leads to the deliberate targeting and unequal burdens of environmental and health hazards on Black, Indigenous, and people of color. That's BIPOC is an acronym. You'll hear people of color and BIPOC used interchangeably. But again, that's Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Next slide, Rachel. And so also you have to consider when you think about what environmental justice means is it comes down to choices. There are choices that you can make, such as if you're going to recycle, if you can or are able to drive an electric vehicle, if you have the means and resources to compost. And then there are choices that affect the environment that you can't make, such as where you live, particularly if you're in a red light neighborhood. You typically don't have a choice of if they're going to site a waste facility there, as happened in 1981 that started that movement. Your schools, that's also an environmental justice or education, which schools you'll be able to, your children will go to. And food deserts. You also, those are choices that you don't truly make if you live in a historically disinvested area, then truly you don't have that choice. You could say again, be healthiest, but if you don't have those options, sometimes it's hard to make those choices. So that's what sets environmental justice or environmental injustice apart from simply making better choices or that ability. Next slide, Rachel, please. And so, as we mentioned in Warren County, North Carolina in 1982, a small African-American community was cited for a hazardous waste landfill. PCB, contaminated soil from those nearby facilities were charged with illegal dumping along the roadways. And so that's when those first protests began. The first national studies on environmental racism concluded that race proves to be the most significant variable tested in association with the location of commercial hazardous waste facilities. Race plays a more significant role than poverty in the siting of environmental dangerous activities. And so that was the conclusion that they came to in those reports. Next slide, Rachel. And so now that we've pretty much come to equal ground about what environmental justice is, very brief history about it, how it kind of began, and what it means, I'll tell how Healing Spaces got started. So this is, I call this part from documenter to documentary. So, as Rachel mentioned, this began just last year. The Documenters Network was a new news agency. They were new to Cleveland. We were covering school board meetings, government meetings, and those type of meetings and convenings that normally the public isn't aware of. It makes those decisions, and there had been no oversight for so long. So that's what the Documenters came in to do. There was an opportunity for a proposal for sponsors were looking to fund an environmental justice project. And so they approached the Documenters as a group of resident writers, like, well, what's going on in your communities? How can we assist you in, making a difference? So it was an idea. So I came with the idea initially to say, I live in Cleveland. That's my community. It's really home to me. And I've always wondered from a young woman, why are there so many abandoned spaces in my community? And, I understand that everything won't be developed, but my simple question was, does it have to be a dumping site? Does it have to be glass? Like, is there nothing that we can do more productive with these spaces? Can we plant some flowers? Can we clean it up and put a bench? What can we do to beautify the environment of people where we live, it would make a big difference. And so my partner there on the left, Kevin, he came into the meeting and he was telling us about, because he works in media, he's freelance, and he was saying, again, another resident just looking to do good. He had filmed a couple documentaries. He said, documentaries are really powerful. You really have to get into them. You take photos, you can share when you, it's easy to share on social media. Well, it was his telling me. He knows how the whole media things work. But I was very compelled. And I said, that sounds like a really good idea. We can take it from a writing project to a documentary. So he said, okay, we agreed that we would do something like that. He said that we would go out to film a test. We would see how it goes, just come out, we'll test the sound, we'll get some B-roll, which is supposed to be like photos and videos of the area, and we can go from there. And if you can see, that's our special sound guy. That's my son, Phoenix. So we can go to the next slide, and we'll show you the results of that test. Foray.
Shaker Heights is almost an adjective. It's just a beautiful green place. I think they call it Garden City, and that's mostly why I came here. There are trees here, there are bird feeders, there are flowers, there's a nice breeze. There's just so many things to enjoy when you're in a space like this. If it were not for this space, I really wouldn't be meeting my neighbors. It brings us together. It makes it beautiful. It's neurobiological. You don't have a lot if you don't have a green space, and I think people don't give enough credibility to that. My question is, if Shaker Heights can look like this, why can't Kinsman Avenue look like this, and they're only a quarter mile away from this location? There are some places where you can literally throw a rock from Kinsman to Shaker and it looks completely different. Why is there so much urban blight in Cleveland, but we can have grassy gardens and labyrinths and meditation spaces and benches and trees to sit under here, but not there? We're at the Robert Fulton Elementary School off of Kinsman Avenue. We have pavement, there's glass, there's lighters, there's tires, there's a dumping here. And this is after a cleanup. I mean, it kind of leaves you feeling left out. I mean, I feel like the space may be neglected, abandoned. I mean, that's what the space shows. Why would you not feel neglected, abandoned, dumped on? Like, that's what the feeling that these places give. I don't think that Shaker Heights residents get up every Saturday morning and clean up the school grounds. They don't. And neither do the people here. It's not their job. I think that the system in place shows you just what they are working for or against or not. And the more I learn, I think it's by design. But also the more I learn, the more empowered I become. If the system won't fix it, then we just have to. And I want to be real clear about that. Like, I just think after 400 years, 60 years, 10 years this school has been here. I mean, we can go back as far or as recent as we want, but the same system is in place, the same result is obvious to see. So I feel like by any means necessary, I'm going to plant flowers out here.
We can end it, Rachel. Oh, yeah, just a couple more seconds. So that was the result of our practice run. If it looks natural, it's because I really was out there to practice. He was like, great, we're gonna produce this. I'm like, okay, we'll see what happens. And people loved it, people loved it. So it was a really good start for me, for us. And just so you know, I did plant flowers out there. I really didn't have a team, I must say. I'm very appreciative for the people that have come along in this journey and who have helped. I appreciate every last one. But a lot of this, sometimes it's just really boots on the ground. I think that's why part of my why is why I do this. Like, I need my life to be perfect. I need to have all these things aligned before I can do this, but I don't. I just went out to 140th and Kingsman, a lot of places people don't really drive by, but I used to live there. So again, that's my community. And so I would go out, drive, planting flowers, digging, and I had a lot of support even from the community. A lot of men would walk by and tell me, I look out for you, I'll protect you. Those are people some people wouldn't speak to. So it was an experience that I really liked. I must say, I also found an appreciation for my ancestors and people who work hard because there was not a water source. And I didn't think about that. I'm just going to go out here and plant flowers. So these are the things you learn, you don't know when to do it. And so I had to haul water in my truck from here to there to plant all these flowers I planted. But it was a very transformative experience. It really propelled me to do more, not only for the environment and the community that I look to serve, but for the people who came before me who didn't have the benefit of a big SUV to haul that water. So things like that, great experience. And so I also, during the time after the documentary, began creating social media, because that initial proposal from let's create a beautiful space, which is what the beginning work was to do, create that space. It was behind the school, so I guess you all saw that. And so it's a lot of people out here doing this work. There were a lot of people with boots on the ground, but you didn't see them. You didn't know about the work that they were doing. You didn't know about the places that they were taking from abandoned lots into nice gardens, herb gardens, flower gardens, planting vegetables. So I said, okay, well, that's the story that we need to tell. We need to tell about the people who are out here on the ground doing this work, because then if we can support this work, we can multiply this action. So next slide. So serendipitously, I was offered a grant. Less offered and more referred 3 or 4 times. So I said, okay, well, maybe I should kind of follow this up. Got the grant, didn't know until later, I didn't, again, much of this is a new learning experience. Oh, that's a big deal. Okay, it's a big deal. We're gonna have to, make it into something nice. And so the grant that we received, we can actually go to the next slide, was for the Ohio Climate Justice Fund. Now, the Ohio Climate Justice Fund was formed in 2020 by an advisory council of environmental leaders, community members, justice workers who wanted to support grassroots organizations like mine who were working at the intersection of racial justice and environmentalism and climate action. They wanted to organize on the following principles. They wanted to be inclusive, which is why they were looking to fund those grassroots organizations. They wanted to reach populations that they didn't normally know about these issues. They wanted to emphasize on bottom-up organizing, and that's where we go into the communities and we start by gathering that data, as you all know, and taking it to the top so we can make those decisions. Let people speak for themselves, from their own lived experience, come and hear what they have to say. Work in solidarity and mutuality. to build just relationships amongst ourselves. I really like that we were looking to empower people and have a commitment to self-transformation. So I said I like those principles. They were quite aligned. There was more empowerment in that. People speak, inspire them up. They're going into the community. Because I hadn't applied for grants before because from my experience, I'm like, well, what's the work? Like, how are we actually making the change? And so these were things that I could see. The fact that I was chosen I was a very new organization. I really didn't have a lot of work. I just had the grant from the first work I did, and they trusted me to do it again. So, next slide, please. We were commissioned to host LLS listening forums. So what LLS stands for is Listen, Lead, Share. Again, those grassroots organizations were to go out and host public conversations with community members and stakeholders and just talk about how we could address climate action and environment in our communities. That was to support that effort to listen to intentional authentically to what people had to say to make that difference. So also, we wanted to put a healing spaces twist onto it. So if you go to the next slide. So with the Listen, Lead, Share, we went out with the intention to hear from the people. We wanted to hear about how environmental justice affected their community. We put together our team and we had just a few very simple rules. We wanted to enjoy the conversation, enjoy the company of the people that we curated, because again, we wanted that good energy, we wanted people who were really passionate, and we wanted them to enjoy the experience that we provided, because our listening forums for the Healing Space Touch, again, as you see, we like to have like a refreshment, we like to have some design, some aromatherapy. We wanted to offer all of that. We wanted to enjoy that. We wanted them to enjoy those things and to share their voice and to complete the survey. So those were the 5 rules. Next slide, please. And so here was the result of those community listening forums that we began. So that was one of several events that we hosted. That was the first of our outdoor series. And just to tell you a little bit about the process of that, when we were looking for a team, well, as I was looking for a team, I didn't know much about team building either. But I did know that I wanted to host really nice events that we could really get people to come to. If I had have advertised for the populations, like the first one I wanted was reentry. And, I really couldn't say, hey, come to a listening forum at the library. We're going to tell you all about environmental justice. Who is she? What is she talking about? What would have been the response? So we wanted to dream up and really be creative. So I reached out to a friend who was an artist. I reached out to another lady who I would call a healer. She offers meditation and yoga and mindful movement. And so the artist healer and the creation healer and the project manager, we all got together and we said, okay, how can we do this? And so we worked it out, very project manager style, very planning it like an event, but made sure that we also adhere to the parameters. We made sure that we provided the education, we made sure we listened to them, we made sure we completed the surveys, but we had a really good time. And we did yoga. We talked about how we can improve our communities, and that's what we go for when we set that intention to have that at our events. And it was really, really good. It was very much a success. It went well, let's say that. And now I would like to get into some of the things that we talked about. Thank you, Rachel. Here are the discussions that we had at those community events. Pollution, much like wealth, is not distributed equally in the United States. Today, Black people are more than 4 times more likely than white people to die of toxic exposure. Again, most of this comes from the siting of facilities, whether it be asthma, COPD, lead exposure. I mean, there's paint, but then there's all the other particulars that come from manufacturing. There is just a variety of toxins that's health, the food, the soil, and the air. All of those are impacted when you're downwind from those facilities. And so we talked about how systemic racism has long influence where major sources of pollution are located within communities. In the early 20th century, white government planners in many municipalities drew redlining maps that identified Black and Latino neighborhoods as undesirable and unworthy of housing loans. Heavy industry was permitted to cluster in those places, adding a toxic emission which persists today. So we had time for questions and reflections. We asked them questions about who in your family has been affected by asthma, COPD. How has COVID impacted you? Because again, that's the information that we wanted to share, but we also allowed time for reflections in that. Well, this is how it was growing up. People could tell stories and tell how it was relatable. So that's how we really were able to incorporate the healing, because yes, you asked the questions, but you had time to talk about intergenerational, that component. We had some older people there talking about how trees once lined the streets. And then we had a young man there talking about how, for instance, he worked for a lawn care company, how lawn care forced that. And so everybody was able to bring their knowledge and their experiences, and we were able to meet on common ground in that way. And so that common connection is very healing to communities. And we did that, as you can see, in Barrio Boys Community Garden. That was our way of supporting those spaces, doing what we say to support those spaces. And this type of thing we talked about. Go to the next slide, please. We also discussed, we also discussed climate change and equity. Go to the next slide, please. Climate change is not the great equalizer. Climate change is defined as a change in the usual weather found in a place. This could be a major change, like in Earth's climate. It can take many years, or climate change does take many years and much time to occur. However, what I wanted to really educate my audience on was letting them know that this is not something that's far from us. This is not just the ice caps in, the northern pole, the northern hemisphere. This actually happens at home. The disasters like Katrina and Hurricane Harvey are a result of climate change. Heavier rainfalls and flooding is a result of climate change, which also affects urban areas more because concrete, the lack of trees, that absorption, just not only lacking the infrastructure, but just lacking the natural environment to gird against these things affects these populations disproportionately. We talked about how the extreme cold is affected by climate change. And again, how majority BIPOC communities are affected disproportionately. And so the conversation around this was, how do you see climate change impacting your community now, in the past, or in the future? And we also talked about, saw climate change as urgency. And so then people were, again, able to make those connections. Okay, well, I do see how that affects me as opposed to being something that doesn't. So that was a win. Next slide, please. Now I will show you all this. I'm assuming most of us know this, but just in case, again, these were the community teachings. We talked about clean energy, that talked about non-renewable sources, such as nuclear, oil, coal, and natural gas, and how those cause emissions, how those create health problems, how those are have a negative effect on the environment and environmental justice disproportionately to those who are poor and of color. And we let them know renewable sources were available in abundance. They had no emissions or very low emissions, and they could be energy efficient. So solar, wind, biomass, geothermal, and hydropower, we discussed how all of those modes and methods would be better alternatives and how they could be better alternatives to our current energy sources. Next slide, please. Clean energy and jobs. In 2019, renewable energy jobs in Ohio grew 7.8%. That's faster than any other Midwestern state. But despite the high growth, these jobs were still overwhelmingly held by white men. And so that's a lot of reason why for the first event, we wanted to attract our reentry population. There is skilled labor that you could train a task force and offer people a living wage for the work that they do. So I really wanted to get this word out, hey, that they're, so these are the type of things we do, not only just share the message, okay, but how can we really be effective in sharing that message? Okay, I have a message about clean energy and jobs, well, let me look for reentry. So that's how we kind of made those connections and what we looked for a lot of times. And the conversation around that, so clean energy, so we talked about how that clean energy and clean tech are some of the fastest growing sectors in the US, with a huge possibility for stable, family sustaining jobs at a variety of training and skill levels was the point that we drove home with this. And conversations around what you value in a good job, ways of security impact, and we discussed what a pathway would look like for the clean energy sector for people in the family and the community. And so we had discussions around how that could really look. Also very fruitful. Next slide, please. And lastly, we discussed electricity inequity. Now I'll share with you all, this is the one that I got the least amount of turnout on, because I realized not only, so with all the other things to discuss, by the time you get to utility aggregation, you probably spent, truly, you are. And so there are some communities, again, learning in the journey they have the infrastructure, they have the social structure to be able to participate in things like this. But this is where it really makes a difference. And this is where we need to get, where we can discuss as a community about utility aggregation and how switching and coming together to find a provider would affect us as a whole. This is why you have to build community and care about the environment. And then you can do things like this. So those are, things we learned. We talked about conversations. So, and the overwhelming majority of low-income households, minority households, low-income households residing in multifamily buildings, and renting households experience higher energy burdens than the average household in the same city. So there is that inequity there. Obviously, not only if utility aggregation is a goal, but again, a lot of people are far from that just by virtue of living in an environment with less trees. Their cooling costs are higher just because they don't have the canopy cover and, things like that. So again, conversation was around where does electricity come from? A lot of people didn't really know, and not me either, honestly, that came with this learning. Did you know that you had a choice in choosing your electric provider? Do you believe you're paying too much? Do you know what you're paying for? And, just conversations around how that works. And so we had those discussions as well. So next, what can we do? So I asked that to the people here, and that's kind of where we left off in these discussions as well. We talked about what problem exists and how they persist. Now, what can we do? What should we do to make a difference? So next slide, please. Reduce, reuse, and recycle. On an individual level, we can compost. Through the journey, I've learned that composting can be the single most effective thing you can do in your home to protect the environment. And I say protect the environment, but a lot of times I say these things and it seems so technical, but really it's just truly the right thing to do. To keep trash out of landfills, to just to do those things and have a eco-conscious lifestyle. Choose an electric vehicle if you have those resources. Next slide, please. We can cooperate. And here's one of my favorite slides. I will read it aloud. It says, if we wait for the government, it will be too late. If we act as individuals, it will be too little. If we act as communities, it just might be enough. And so ultimately, that's Healing Spaces. It really drives home to what we have to do. This is a community effort. It's not an individual effort. It's really not a government effort, as we see. It's up to us to make good decisions for ourselves and for our communities. And it truly is that simple. I found that time-consuming activism is not really required. It's just about making better decisions every day where you are. And one of my favorite quotes has come to be my favorite quote. Margaret Mead says, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And yes, and collaborate. That's also something that we can do with one another, individually, with organizations like Healing Spaces. Education, facilitation, demonstrations, presentations, listening forums, and more. You can be creative. That particular photo is from the Nourishing Power Council network that Rachel mentioned in the beginning. That was a demonstration that we had at Rittal, which is an amazing healing space. That's just something beautiful, a very notable, probably in the United States, if not the world, just like the work that they're doing, the space, how they do it. They have hydroponics, aquaponics. They have composting, they call that Black Gold. There's farming, they have dining, they're community building. They are the epitome of what we need in our community. So definitely kudos to Nourishing Power Network for having that event there and Britall for existing. And so that's me and another participant composting, doing a composting demonstration, which is awesome. And next, please. And so if you are interested in collaboration, let me know. My name is Tila Patterson as well. My email address is also tilapatterson@gmail.com. Just put I am interested in collaboration in the subject line so I know how to reach out to you. Thank you, Darcy. And next slide, please. And so also at the end of presentations, and I'll do that at the end of this one as well. Jacqueline Gillum, I know a lot of you may be familiar with her. She's a co-founder of Black Environmental Leaders. I never had the pleasure to meet her, but it's like, I definitely feel her spirit. And so I found out the first event I hosted when I was seeking re-entry population and, you know, that kind of conversation. What happened was I ended up having a lot of city leaders there. I invited just a couple and they invited more and more and more and more. And so that's how I found out when we were again in the room that's how Black Environmental Leaders got their start at Zanzibar, having a very similar meeting, not what I was going for, but what happened. This is how it happened. And also one of my favorite healing spaces on 116th and Kinsman was a dumping ground next to a cleaners. They cleaned it up. They have a little box there. They put a shelter because I have to say, you know, we have all this transportation. That's also an environmental justice issue. We have people who use public transportation, and I don't know how you're supposed to ride the bus without a shelter. You don't sit down, you get rained on, it's snowed on. And it's one of the only places with a shelter. And I hate to say that's a healing space. I mean, I'm glad to say it's a healing space, but it's bittersweet. It's bittersweet that for miles around, that's the only place with a shelter. Some flowers, they put some trees there, and it's somewhere you may want to sit, as opposed to, again, empty space with concrete. So I just appreciate it. They painted a mural of this very picture. They just did this last week. And I love it. So it's just like all of those things. And so I appreciate the work that she did to allow me to get in this space. Black Environmental Leaders is one of those organizations that set up the fund that works on the Ohio Justice Fund, that was in the room with the Environmental Justice Initiative. So there are people who trailblaze the way so that I could walk through the door. So thank you. And lastly, I would like to close with gratitude for you all for taking your time, giving your presence, your attention. Thank you. I am grateful for you, and let us all use our gifts to heal the world, just where you are. If you're an artist, if you sing, just how you could support your community. It could be with the cleanup, but there are so many ways that we could come together and support your local community garden, community space. Lastly, let's talk. Questions, reflections. There's a survey. So if you're at home or you're hybrid, you can hover over that. I will have something here. So the people who are in-house after questions can complete that survey. But if you're at home, please take your time to hover over the QR code and take the survey. The code would be HS6. Healing Spaces 6.
HS6?
Yes.
Is it capital? Does it matter if it's capitals or not?
I don't think it's case sensitive, but do it. Yeah,
Okay.
capital H, capital S, the number 6.
Okay,
Yes, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
So,
And so, questions, reflections.
can we first give you a round of applause? Comments in the chat about how inspiring your presentation is, and so I think we're all feeling the same way. And again, to the point of gratitude, we're grateful that you could be here with us today. And for a moment, I will go ahead and stop sharing screen just so we can feel a little closer to the folks on the screen here. And yeah, folks in the room have questions. We have about 10 or so minutes. And but if you have a question and you're virtual, please enter it in the chat, and I'm also happy to call on you and have you unmute so you can ask it in person verbally as well. But yeah, sorry, back to Tila. If anybody has.
Yeah, definitely. If anybody has questions, we'll give the people online just a little more priority. People in here, if you wanted to stay behind and ask questions for a little bit, I will be here. So, but any questions, any reflections, any aha moments, any, just whatever you have to say. I just wanted to give a moment for that.
Right now, the folks online might be typing. I'm looking, I don't see anything yet. So if
Okay.
anybody in the room wants to say.
Yeah.
How many of the Listen Like Share sessions do you guys host?
So we hosted probably about 5 official sessions. And I would say one was hybrid, mostly in person. We just kind of said one was completely virtual, and the other 2 to 3 were in person. Kind of had the s'mores one time, painting again, just that sort of thing. And so we also kind of had mini events, which is kind of this is really on the line. Like I kind of consider this an event when we come out, share the message, share some camaraderie, some design, some aromatherapy. We had a couple of these too, like 3 of these. We were Ridall, Juneteenth. For Teachers Appreciation Week at my son's school, I set up tea and put out some information. I was like, okay, this is kind of eventful. And so just sharing the message like that, because it's really that simple to share and create innovative ways.
Oh, and it looks like we have in the chat, they were just noting that the code given may take you to the edited version or the edit version of that survey. So I think it looks like Megan gave us a clean link here so that
thank
folks
you.
aren't getting into the back end.
Thank you
So
so
I'll put
much.
that in the chat.
Appreciate it.
Tila, awesome presentation, and thank you for recognizing Jackie Gillen. She was a member of our Sweatland Center Advisory Council. And, I think just reminding us that the lines of change are really hard to see the direct connections, but if you can see that bigger picture, and I think so much of your work around healing spaces is this creating opportunities that we really don't know what's going to happen, but it's your intent for the good, which I think is really a beautiful thing. So I'm curious from your, the documentary seems like it's such a valuable mobilizing, organizing, consciousness raising strategy. What other opportunities do you see related to integrating documentary into, environmental justice work locally? And how do we, are there ways that you think it could really help engage more people and, activate change in a broader way?
Yes, thank you. And absolutely. I think as my partner was able to so eloquently say, it's true. It could be the key. And like for the movement, that movement, again, brought in so many creators because that, as you know, art, is a part of any movement. And so documentary film production is a part of that movement. That's why I wanted to be really sure to capture what we were doing out, because even those kind of documentaries, people respond to visually seeing like, okay, that was a good time. It's different when you say, oh, we're going to have this, or we had that, but I see people having a great time. And you were talking about environmental justice. I want to be a part of that. So it's very vital to what we do and how I could see it, to producing viral content. Like that's how movements are spread. Like it can be viral online and on the internet. So I think that's very important, is what I would say, to mobilizing and creating those networks.
I just wanted to take a moment because I noticed 2 questions came in the chat. And one is from Candace and says, great job, Tila. Looking forward to more of the work you build with documenters. I want to know, what is your biggest goal as healing spaces move forward? And I think we might have time for the second one too, but we can start with the first one.
Okay, so the next goal is healing spaces move forward. As Darcy mentioned, Producing documentaries is a really good way. When I started and we wanted to know what environmental justice was, I went to YouTube. What is environmental justice? There's nothing on YouTube about environmental justice. So actually, to even answer Darcy's questions more forwardly, there's a big open space. And so my partner and I did discuss like we should do it. What is environmental justice video? We have the information. It's just what I've been kind of going out and learning. Just that is a space that's wide open for this kind of work. And so Candace, yes, I want to get back into or reinvigorate that documentary making. And then I also want to, with the work that I'm doing with Neighborhood Leadership Institute, we will be hosting community events. So again, mobilizing people, it is really about getting people to come out and network with one another, and talk to one another, and truly building community. So community building is going to be really big for me, and getting back into producing media that reaches the masses.
Yeah. And it looks like our second question from I believe it's Maren. How can suburban groups find urban communities interested in this work so we can connect and support understanding and opportunities together?
So you can reach out. There are some community gardens who requested volunteers or volunteers. So that's why, again, we do this work. We find out that people need help connecting and collaborating. And so we do like to be a space for that. Sometimes people don't necessarily want to work in silos individually. They just don't know how to connect, resources, know who to connect to. So we will be a resource where it comes to connecting and doing that.
I think the point you made earlier about like being a space to like spread the word and storytell, like just from coming to your social media pages, you can learn about other groups. Like I hadn't heard of Barrio Boy before hearing about your event and stuff. So thank you. And it looks like it's 10 o'clock. So if anybody needs to go, please don't. It's okay, no problem. But it looks like our final question from Tim says, thank you for this great talk, Tila. Conversations are so important. I would love to hear more about the electricity story. I wonder if nutrition equity and electricity equity are related. Could more local control and co-ops help us?
Nutrition equity and electricity equity?
Yes.
I am certain. I like to find connections in everything. I cannot see them being disparate and there's no connection. I would love to know that connection. I like to research, so I will.
Thank you. I'm sorry, folks online. I meant to let everybody ask their own question. I totally forgot. I'm just now realizing as I see Tim on meeting. So my apologies to folks online. But can we do one more round of applause? Pleasure, and everybody, you saw how to stay connected, and we'll also be putting a recording of this seminar presentation on our social media and sharing. So keep an eye out if you want to share it with others and continue spreading the word. And again, thanks for coming out, those online and those in person, braving the elements today. I know it was not the most pleasant weather, but we're glad you're here.
I appreciate you all so much. I'm sorry. Yes, no, thank you for being here. I saw the rain, but I was able to bring out my boots. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.